good?
Bam.
All right, so can I get a motion to leave executive session and to continue forward with our work session meeting? I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
We'll make the motion. Bo, second it.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimously approved. Okay, so first off, before we continue going forward with anything else, since Mr. Jake Alianello is here, he's going to give a presentation, well, not a presentation, but a quick debriefing to the board with what he's met with myself. And so you guys know what's going on. Also, a quick note before you start, Jake. Tuesday, we're meeting at 4:30 at Kelly Summits to look at the springs. So you guys know I did meet with Jay. Everybody is able to attend and we're welcome to attend. So you understand it's not just myself that knows how this project is working, but to attend. And that's absolutely fine. It doesn't break open meeting law. The only thing is there cannot be discussion about money or making any actions and what's going forward. This is pretty much just to show up, we observe, and Jake explains how the process is going to go. Cool?
Informational.
Great.
Informational, correct.
And this is when?
This is Tuesday at 4:30 at Kelly Summit. You know where Kelly Summit is, correct?
Sure.
It's
We'll find it.
when you're going to Little Valley, right at, you know where Kurt Brummingen's house is, where Landscape Brothers.
Yes.
Okay. As you go around that little bend, you go through the snake and you come out. On the left is a driveway. It goes way up. That's Kelly Summit. You can't miss it.
Very deep.
Yeah, I see a sign there for Landing Road.
It's a terrible,
Down that
terrible.
road you went too far.
Yeah. Mango Lake is too far.
If you guys want to meet me here, like at 20 after 4, and if you guys want to ride with me, that's fine. And we'll go.
This is coming Tuesday.
Tuesday at 4:30, yes. All right, so Mr. Alianello, you have the floor.
Alright. I don't know all of you. My name is Jake.
My name is Bo Wolf. Nice to meet you.
you.
Wordsmith.
Nice to meet you. You said,
Word, dirt or W? Dirt or the W.
I think it's maybe not the first time you said that.
Bo. Tell them all that.
I'm Jason Crawford. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Handshake?
I met you. Yeah, Tom. I did have a handshake. Here's one of my cards. Now you guys have my contact info. I think I gave you one
Yes, you did.
last week, right? Yeah, and Dan asked me to come and speak with you guys to kind of give you a review of where we stand on the water project and kind of the history that led us to this. There's also a little bit of background on what the village has for water infrastructure, and just so you guys are all, where I put together this just brief outline that you guys might want to have to follow along and you can review it later on. And then there's going to be two rows. Here's a copy for you.
Thank you.
There's going to be two main reports that our firm prepared in the years that we've been working on this project, and I gave a digital copy of those over to Dan, and I have a digital copy with me. I can give to Rose in case any of you guys want to get a hold of them, and if you need a printed copy, we can work through that, whether you get it from us or Rose prints a copy.
I will actually send everybody what digital copy.
Okay.
So Rose, you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So like I said, my name is Jake Alianello, and I work for MDA Consulting Engineers. We're a small civil engineering firm over in Elkville, New York. We've been over there for a long time, over 30 years. My dad started the company over there, and I'm working with him now. We work with a lot of small communities in western New York, primarily Cattaraugus County, we get up to Erie County, Chicago County. And we work with a lot of small communities on their water, sewer projects, things like that. So we have quite a bit of experience with this type of a project. We've worked with a lot of, we just finished up with Cherry Creek. We're working with the town of Randolph on a big water project right now. So very similar projects to yours.
And they're local.
Yeah, we're local, like I said, we're out of Elkville. Both my dad and I live in the town of Albion here, so. We've worked with Cattaraugus too over the years on several different projects, so we kind of have a starting familiarity with your water system based on all the work we've done in the past. And as this project developed, ultimately the village had to put out a RFP to hire a consultant to actually work with them, and we went through that competitive process, and ultimately were selected by the village So, as you can see, with what I put in front of you here, I figured I'd start with a quick overview of your water system, just so you're aware of, I don't know, your various levels of familiarity, but you have a number of water sources currently. There's been old wells over the years, but at this point you have the Blackmar well, which is just outside the village, it goes south on 353. Cobo well, which is a little further out in the village, once you go past the highway barns for the town there. Then you have Mayo Road Spring Site, Canyon Hill Spring Site, and the Kelly Summit Spring Site. And those are all quite a distance out of town. Okay. All those spring sites are old, like 1890s, early 1900s, right around there. So they're over 100 years old. For water treatment, what you have right now is your wells don't have any treatment on them right now. The Blackmar Cobo well, I'll get to that. But you have a water treatment plant, which is a slow sand filter at the Mayo Road site. So it's pretty much adjacent to the springs there. And it treats the water from the Mayo Springs and from the Canyon Hill spring site, which is a couple thousand feet from there. Then you have another water treatment plant that's essentially identical, and it's right at the Kelly Summit spring site, which is on 353 just before you get to Lincoln Lake. So you have those two water treatment plants. It ends up forming kind of a wishbone. There's two Y's that go out of town. They come together so that well, I'll jump back here. There's also a Blackmar well right now, and we'll get to how it happened, but DEC attempted to construct a filter plant there, a stripper plant that would remove the contamination that's in Blackmar well. As of right now, the best way to sum it up is that that's not functional. And the DEC did that themselves, and so it's not functional. So Blackmar well is essentially not really a treated well right now. Transmission mains, there's a pipeline from the Canyon Hill Springs over to the Mayo Road treatment plant. There's the Mayo Road Springs tie over to the plant. Then there's a pipeline from the Mayo Road plant to the Cobo well site, and then one from the Kelly Summit site out to Cobo well, and they come together in a junction box there. And then you pick up the Cobo well, and they head into town, they go through the Blackmar well site, where that well would contribute. So it all comes together, and then it basically just flows through the distribution system through the entire village. And ends up, your water storage tank is up on West Hill Road. And so that's kind of the backbone of your infrastructure.
That's the reservoir, correct?
Yeah, the reservoir water tank is on West Hill. There's the old in-ground reservoir there that looks like a pond. I don't think that was filled in.
And there's no filtration, any of that?
The two treatment plants, Mayo Road and Kelly Summit, those are both slow sand filters, is the technical term for what they do. So they're a filter that's they look like a large pole barn with a concrete basin in them, and they're filled with the same media. They provide a biological and a physical filtering, so they're supposed to develop a beneficial bacterial growth colony. They call it a Schmutzdeck. Okay. Which is a German term for it. But anyhow, it's actually, the springs that you have are all classified by the health department. It's an EPA classification. They're called groundwater under the direct influence of surface water, GUDI. Okay, and here's still that term around, but GUDI basically means that they need to be treated. There's a whole bunch of rules that EPA has put out about how you have to treat that. But true groundwater out of a deep well is relatively safe, and it's going to be, it's not going to have E. coli and Giardia, some of these main contaminants that we look at. When you have springs like this, they're close to the surface, they're vulnerable to surface water intrusion. So it can end up with the water being contaminated. And you also, indicators of that, they'll do testing, and they can test for things like bacteria. E. coli is the first thing they check for. And then total coliform. But they'll also see things like, if you see turbidity that kicks up, if the water gets muddy coming into the plant whenever it rains, that's a really good sign that you've got surface water that's making its way into your spring box and then into the plant. So anyhow, those treatment plants were built, identical plants. They were built in 2001, approximately. Our firm was not involved in the construction of those or the design of those, but
is pretty darn clean.
Yeah,
That's
the
correct.
spring water, certainly when it's not a real rainy period, is clean as far as low turbidity, and it's also pretty good water quality. That's why the springs have been maintained as a source by the village for over 100 years, is that they're a good water source. They make good quality water. The water coming out of Blackmar and Coble wells is not nearly as good. It's a lot of iron, I think, is in Blackmar well,
Yeah.
and so that's when you get rusty water in your house, your white laundry turning red. So that's why basically the village's operating protocol is we try to use the springs, but what's happened is they're so old and they're in such poor condition that they taper off as the summer goes on. It gets drier. Now they're actually getting less surface water going in, and they don't make enough water. And so that's where the wells have been used traditionally to supplement. At least in recent history, that's how it's been run. And at this point, when this whole project came about, if we go to the history here, the springs are old. Oh, I skipped right over. One final thing you should be aware of, and Dan will probably keep you guys appraised of this, but the village has a significant existing water debt. So every time we've done a capital project in the past, the village has taken combinations of grants and loans to pay for that, and they're still paying on loans from a number of those water projects. So some of those are closer to being paid off, some of those are quite a ways down the road right now. So basically, as we approach this whole topic of a water project right now, it's all colored through the lens of the village owes a lot of money, which means that, what they charge the users for water, a certain percentage of that is already just going to paying off the debt. And if you take on more debt to do a new water project, then it's just gonna raise the cost of water for a typical user in the village, okay? So that's just one final point on your infrastructure is you still have the debt on some of those projects. Actually, most of those projects, I think the Coble Blackmar wells and the spring plants, I think you're paying on all those still. Some of those were loans that were like 40-year loans, so it will take a while to get through.
Quick question, Gene, is that what was, first off, was the debt able to be,
Refunded, that's it.
I have not heard a word from that company.
Municipal Solutions is who
Yeah,
we're
I haven't
working
heard a
with.
word from them.
Okay, we can touch base with them if you'd like, but probably we need to get you guys in touch with them, because they're very aware of, basically, and as I mentioned to Dan, there's law that prevents us as an engineering firm from advising on fiscal matters.
Yeah.
And there's a company, Municipal Solutions, that the village has been working with, that's what they do, they're municipal fiscal advisors. I can say from my experience, they're very good at what they do. We've worked with them on dozens of projects in the last 20 years.
I have their email if you want me to send them an email.
Yeah.
actually, would you be, if you could, and copy all of us and see maybe if we could set up a meeting at some point in time, or if they would even be able to attend a board meeting, so that, because that's obviously gonna help our budget immensely as well, correct? Refinance, or refunding the debt.
Yeah, because like you said, we still owe on all 3 water projects.
Mm-hmm.
The sewer project is gonna be paid off,
Yeah,
but
I
the
wasn't.
water project itself, we're paying between principal and interest almost $90,000 a year
Mm.
between the 3 projects.
Yeah, you also have your water distribution system within the village. I actually probably should have made that a bullet point in here. Your piping within the village that distributes all the water out to the customers is in fairly good shape. It's relatively new, whereas the transmission mains are 100 years old. It's, I want to say, it's from the same general time frame as the plants, so the treatment plants, so early 2000s.
Yeah.
Might be the late 90s, but so it's fairly new in terms of water systems. Modern piping materials, etc.
Okay.
Okay, so history of this water project. So the springs were being used during the less dry portions of the year, and then you'd use wells to supplement. The springs are really old. Spring water treatment plants are in relatively new condition. So in 2008, at the Blackmar well, they detected methylene chloride, which is also known as dichloromethane. It's basically, we'll say, a paint thinner product. It's a chemical. They detected it in the water in Blackmar well at an extreme extremely low concentration. Below what's called the maximum contaminant level, those are set by EPA and then ultimately by the New York State Department of Health regulations. So methylene chloride, we're talking parts per billion. I think it's, I want to say 10 parts per billion is the limit. But our report covers that in more detail. But it was below that level. But from 2008 onward, as they sampled, they saw it climbing. Times it went away, the spikes kept getting higher. So in August of 2012, the sampling was done, and it was well above the MCL. It was like 13 parts per billion instead of 10. So at that point, in November 2012, the Cattaraugus County Department of Health issued a letter to the village about the sampling results in the exceeding the MCL, and ordered that the village discontinue use of Blackmar well. Okay, so Blackmar well is your single largest source in the village, and one of the big things is that it's also closer to the village. Okay, so remember I said all these pipes are 100 years old that carry all the water from the springs to the village. Blackmar well is just outside the village, so it doesn't have the vulnerability of all these old pipelines to get the water here. So it wasn't necessarily good water quality, but it was a reliable source, and now it can't be used.
Did you see a trend in the spikes?
Yes, I mean, over time, like I said, it was coming and going. We have in our report, I believe we have a sampling summary that shows all the testing.
Like anything in particular that?
Well, what happens with it is chemicals like that, when you get them in a groundwater aquifer, basically under the ground, you have a well, under the ground there's water moving in an aquifer, and it has a direction of flow, and what you're typically seeing is somehow contamination entered the groundwater, and as it moves into the cone of influence of your well, so the water, your well sitting there drawing water from all sides, and as that chemical, it can move very slowly. It can take 20 years for it to move from the point of contamination until it starts getting into the area where your water is drawing from.
So it's almost impossible to pinpoint.
Well, DEC has been involved in a whole investigation, and where they drill a lot of test wells, and I believe DEC has issued a report to the village. I have to check on the status of where that stands as far as they've found.
The report was issued to the board.
Okay.
The board all received copies of it. I think Daniel and Tom have copies. The old board members have the rest of the copies.
It's literally this thick.
It's no joke.
It's no joke.
There is
So,
one,
you wanna
there is
get
one
rid
in
of
the
footnotes
outer
on that.
office by the mailboxes.
They have there should be an executive summary in it, but
Oh, okay.
But the bottom line is DEC investigated where it's coming from, but it's not something that's easy to deal with, okay? And oftentimes what happens with a chemical contamination like this is perhaps over time, maybe given another 10, 15 years, it'll go on its way and move past in the groundwater, and you can start using the well again. But in the meantime, basically, without that well, the springs can make water during the early parts of the year when there's lots of groundwater. In the late summer, early fall, they're going to fall short. So 2013 was the big year. 2011, 2012 were dry years. 2013 was shaping up to be the same thing. So in the early spring of 2013, the village really was scrambling to try to come up with a response to this situation. So what happened is, looking ahead at it, they had us go ahead with writing a report that was used for applying for funding, and with Municipal Solutions Aid, they applied for several different types of funding to try to get grants, subsidized loans, with whatever they could. I know that Jason Offerbeck was the water operator, and Eric Pritchard, who was the mayor at the time, went as far as making trips to Albany to meet with state senators. They had a meeting where they had the director of the Department of Health there, and they had really high-ranking people in the Department of Environmental Conservation, and they were getting people to look at the project, but there's only so much they can do. They can't just hand you the money. So ultimately, we put together that report. We identified a whole scope of what needed to happen to try to deal with the deficiencies that the water system had. That report is dated March 22nd. That's one of the two reports that Dan's going to give you, and that really describes the situation at the time and shows how we developed the initial scope. Came out to a $3.6 million project. Okay. We identified a lot of work. We're talking pipes that are out there, there's places they're running above ground. They had bolted together joints where the bolts are totally gone. They rusted away, and so they're just holding together basically by rust. So we're talking very vulnerable. You know, there's leaks throughout it. Right now, we know how much water we're making at the 2 spring sites, but before it makes it to the village, we don't even know how much of it actually. You know, we know a lot of it's making here, but we're losing a lot of it along the way. Of the 3 spring sources back in 2013, only 2 of them were even connected. The Kelly Summit or Canyon Hill Springs, the transmission line had totally failed over several ravines, so that spring site was not even making water for you guys. That's the type of disrepair. It's just the age of the infrastructure, and it's expensive to keep up that many miles of pipeline. Some of it's very hard to access. It's in wetlands, way off of the roads, where you basically get to it by foot.
And I'll say, he's not cutting his ravines. There's several places, one of the places that we did a lot of work, I mean, it's where the pipe now does cross the ravine, it's a good 25, 30-foot drop anyway. Which
There was a place where the pipe had been suspended by cables. There were big abutments placed, and then there was like a cable bridge, and the cables had failed, and the pipe was just laying in pieces at the bottom of the ravine. So all the water that was piped to that point was just dumped in. So anyhow, we identified this project. Municipal Solutions, you know, was pursuing funding opportunities. In 2013, with the village looking at what was happening, you guys just went ahead. Jason went ahead with local workforce, the water guys, and they went out there and tried to do improvements. So they did temporary repairs to the Canyon Hill line. They improved some of the springs at Canyon Hill. They improved some of the springs at Mayo Road. And they basically patched together enough of the infrastructure to get enough water to make it through that summer. And they did that. They got a little bit of limited funding from DEC at that point. Okay, DEC wasn't in a position where they could give them a lot of money, but they managed to come up with some money. And Rose has records of all that work. I want to say it was less than $20,000. I think that they were given though on a $3.6 million project.
It was like 18 something. That
Yeah,
sounds
consistently 16.
It was a spit in the bucket, you know, but it was enough that Jason was able to buy some materials and go up there. You know, the one ravine where the pipe was down, they just put some telephone poles across the ravine as a bridge and put the pipe on those. It's working right now. That's what's working right now, but it's not a long-term solution.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do.
So anyhow, all that work resulted in getting enough water to get to 2013. Also, at that point, DEC going through their investigation, they basically got to a point where they were able to tap into DEC Superfund money, which there's a large pot of money that DEC can access to deal with environmental disasters like this. And they use that money to try to build that treatment plant at Blackmore Well. So that's basically headed up by DEC, managed by DEC, directed by DEC, and they hired their own consultants, and they came in and put in this plant, and it basically never really worked. It still isn't working. They're rumored to have spent like $1 million on this plant. The trick is that they're not able to spend funds on a permanent improvement, so they couldn't build a building there, so they tried to fit it all into a shipping container. You know, like a
Common truck.
yeah, and the physical constraints are such that they had to have pump speed controllers and everything to match everything through the treatment train. And it gets kind of complicated, but bottom line is that it wasn't working well. Jason was still the water operator, and he was not at all satisfied. It wouldn't stay running. So $600,000 was given to the village. In 2014 in the summer, we went through the State Environmental Quality Review Act, so we did our state level environmental reviews, because it's part of the funding application process for the one source of funding we received. So the village did all that with us in 2014, ultimately issued a finding of no significant negative environmental impacts. It's called a negative declaration in June of 2014. And was ultimately, the biggest source of funding for projects like this is something called the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And there's a whole scoring process, and basically you apply, you get money, you use it on your project, and then as you pay it back, it goes back into the pot and they give it out to other communities. So they have this revolving fund. And it's used to fund all sorts of water infrastructure, municipal water infrastructure projects across the state. There's a corollary that's a Clean Water State Revolving Fund that they use for sewer projects. Anyhow, in the competitive scoring on that, basically the village scored just below a threshold that would have kicked us into more favorable terms, but they did qualify for, they basically were told, yeah, we'll fund the rest of the project, which is approximately $3 million remaining, at subsidized interest. I believe the terms were 1/3 of the going rate of interest at the time, but basically, with the amount of debt that you guys had, and Gene might have been more involved in looking at these, but the village looked at the numbers with Municipal Solutions, and to borrow $3 million more, even at that subsidized interest rate, was driving the typical cost for a user in the system well above what was acceptable to the village board at the time. And we're talking, you guys would have been paying more for water than anybody else around, by a long shot. It just wasn't affordable. If you can, what we typically see for small communities like Cattaraugus, they'll score above that threshold and they'll basically receive, they can sometimes receive up to $2 million worth of grant, and then they can receive 0% interest for the loan. And as soon as you drop down to 0% interest, it really helps out the situation. But the village didn't score there. Basically, this particular year, there were two big projects down in the southeast part of the state that used up a lot of the funding, and so it was the first year that you could score high enough to get a hardship application, but you didn't score high enough for the fully subsidized interest. Be that as it may, we didn't have enough funding to do the whole project, okay? And basically, because the way the consolidated funding application works, you tell the funding agencies, here's my project, and I'm trying to get money from all these sources. Well, CDBG gave you guys $600,000, but they said it's to be used towards the whole project. So they said, if you're gonna use that money, you have to do the whole project, which is tricky for the village. We couldn't get started on a $3.5 million project or $3.6 million project and not have $3.6 million to use on it without any guarantee, because you'd have to finish the project with straight up local funds, loans at full interest, whatever. So the project was kind of stalled out, and what we were doing was waiting for the next funding year to come around to see if we would qualify for Drinking Water State Revolving Funds the next year. And so basically, in the meantime, in late 2014, the village and our firm and Municipal Solutions went back to CDBG and went back and forth with them with a bunch of conversations, and were able to convince them that we could come up with a limited scope of work. We're going to call it phase 1. So we're going to pick out these pieces of the big project and use the $600,000 to do those pieces, and we would still benefit. The CDBG and community development block grants are aimed towards benefiting low and moderate income users, is the big keyword that they use. So we would still benefit the low and moderate income users within this system the same way as the whole project would have. So we argued the point with them to try to break this money free, and ultimately they agreed. We had to write a report, so that was dated November 10th, 2014. That's the second of the two reports that you guys will want to read if you want to get up to speed on everything, where we identified phase 1's work. And I can quickly tell you guys what that consists of. We identified two major things. Metering in the village, because because of how everything's set up, we know how much water we're making. We don't have a clue how much we're selling to people. We don't have a clue how much we're overflowing at the tank, because when you have springs that run all the time, the water pipes down to the village, and ultimately, if you don't need it, it just overflows. So we don't have any sort of comprehensive accounting of how much water we're using, how much we're actually getting to the village from what we make, all these things, right? And so the village doesn't know how much water they need. So here we identify a big project, $3.6 million, and we have to use, standardized figures for what a household might use and things like that, without using a real number of what does Cattaraugus need for water, okay? And so by putting metering as a first priority, they allow you guys to equitably divide the cost of the water amongst all your users, and it also allow you to get a good accounting, so you know how much water you need, so you know what to pursue with future phases of the project as a higher priority, okay? So metering in general means customer meters, it means meter reading software and equipment, it means metering the overflow at the tank, and then a meter pit at the site of the Blackmar well that would monitor how much water is making it through the transmission main to the village, and then meters on each of the two branches that go from the two treatment plants and come together at Cobo Well, so there'll be a vault there, and you'll have a meter on each Y coming in, and that way you'll be able to keep track of how much water you're making, how much is making it to Cobo Well, how much is making it to the village, how much you're selling, and how much you're overflowing. You got a complete picture now, and then you can keep track of things. You can keep track of where there's leaks. You can identify you're losing so much in this branch, and know where to go and try to fix the pipe. So that was identified as a $400,000 component of phase one, and then the second component was rehabbing springs, doing general rehab work out at the Kelly Summit Springs, which is on 353. Basically, the logic here is that the pipeline from those springs to the village is more accessible, it's in better condition, so spending money out there is putting it into a more reliable location than if we went after Mayo and Kelly Summit. Jason band-aided those together, and they're making good water right now, but you could spend a lot of money out there if the pipe fails somewhere else where you can't get it, it's still not doing any good. So we identified essentially $250,000 worth of work to do out at Kelly Summit to try to get the springs there. The biggest thing is they make plenty of water in the wet part of the year, but then it drops off in the dry part of the year. And what you want to really aim for is if you protect the spring box so it's not picking up surface water, in the wet part of the year you might actually see a little bit lower production because you're not picking up all this rain and everything, which is good. And then in the dry part of the year you'll be capturing more of the true groundwater, and you'll end up with better production year-round and more reliable production in the springs, and hopefully you don't have to depend on any wells as much.
So everybody knows this is Mark L. He's the Jake's dad, but he's the lead guy for NBA.
And Mark and I are both involved in this project quite a bit from our firm, and then we also.
Oh, I didn't mean to make it look like sound like you're not.
Oh no, I just wanted to point
you're
out
doing a great
that
job.
he works on the project, I'm working on the project, and then you might hear there's another engineer at our firm, or another engineering designer. His name is Ben Slop, and he'll also be working with us. He's working under me to do actual design on the job once we get going. So those will be probably the three people from our firm that you'll interact with the most.
Question for you guys in regards to total phase one is $650,000. And that's all an estimate saying if things don't go, if there's some, because you guys take in consideration if there's some issues that happen along the way, correct?
Yeah, those budgets, basically, when we put together a budget, we'll identify the pieces of work and estimate what we think they'll cost based on our experience, based on the sources that are out there. And then we'll end up with a construction subtotal. So for metering, basically, when you look at all the line items, it comes out to $300,000 worth of actual construction cost. And then we usually put in on the order of a 10% construction contingency. So whenever you start doing construction and you start working with things that are unknowns, there are typically going to be things that come up during construction administration from the village's end, paying municipal solutions, because they do, the loan administration or grant administration. And then project contingency, so if something comes up, not a contingency directly related to construction, but related to, needing to get an easement that wasn't able to be seen. So that's a more generalized, contingency, but basically, that number, it ranges quite a bit, but on this particular estimate, let's see, on the meter one, and the other one, Kelly, we had about 22% allocated for that. And again, you may not use all of that, but that's how we end up with these totals. So we end up with $650,000 worth of work identified, and you have $600,000 worth of grant money theoretically to use towards that. And so there's going to be some money that has to be a local share to complete this first phase, if everything comes out to our estimates. Now, it's possible when you bid it, things will come in a little lower. We have pretty good numbers on stuff like the meter contract, which is the bulk of the work, because we just finished up one job in Cherry Creek. That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. And then we just bid the one in Randolph, and that was constructed last fall. And so, we have pretty good numbers on what it's costing right now to get meters installed, what's costing to buy the meters. And, we've seen bids from different companies.
Now, this is just meters, this doesn't include lines, just to change out old meter.
What it includes, in this phase one, is meters, so a new residential meter, a radio that attaches to it, and then there's a meter reading system. So basically it allows, instead of you having to get into the house and go down in the basement and read the meter, it allows you to ping the radio and ask the meter what you're reading, and it responds back to the truck, from a laptop in their truck. So instead of spending, I don't know what Jason and Corey are spending, a couple days, 3-4 days of guys going around the village every quarter, in an hour, 2 hours, you could drive around the village and get all your reads. And you don't have to deal with trying to get into people's houses and all that.
And you're also replacing meters at the sites, correct? What's there now?
Yeah, right now, you can meter how much you produce at the 2 water treatment plants
Right.
and at the wellheads, but you don't know how much you're losing on the transmission lines coming in.
Correct, and that's,
So you basically you have the residential meters, and then we have essentially 4, I'm going to call bulk water meters. So they might be an 8-inch meter. And so you have 2 out at the Cobo site that pick up the 2 springs coming together. Let me, if you guys don't mind, I can open this up. We're going to might be able to visualize it a little better. This is an exhibit I just grabbed that we use as part of our environmental review, but this is where your one spring site is, one treatment plant, and this is the other one. So this is 353, this is Mayo Road, this is New Albion, little crossroads out New Albion. Okay, so you have springs here that make water, and it goes down the hill and back up to the plant, gets treated. Springs right here get treated, and that all comes. Right now, it goes like this in back country. It goes through a culvert under the railroad, like literally on a ledge up in the creek culvert under the railroad. And right here's where the Cobo well site is. And at the Cobo well site, there's a vault, and these 2 spring lines come together. So we'll put a meter on each of those, and then you'll know I'm making 100 gallons a minute here. I'm metering 80 gallons a minute here. Somewhere in this line, I'm losing 20 gallons a minute out of the leak.
and right now, there's nothing.
There's no way knowing. Right now, we know I might make 200 gallons a minute here, but I don't know if 100 or 150 or 20 is making it to the village.
Right.
I have no idea.
And the other end of it is, if the springs produce more than the village is using, it overflows at the tank, and you don't know how much is overflowing at the tank either.
Right. So we were going to put a meter here, here. Basically, they're going to be in the same vault, though. They're right there in the ground. For these 2 lines. And then we were going to put a meter right here, which would be right before you go into the village, right before you tie into all the new piping.
Inside the fence at
It'll
the
be
black
down
one.
pretty much where the valve is at the bridge now.
No, it'll be, the line, it'll be inside the fence compound at the black.
But we actually have the black barn well shut off, correct?
Right, yeah, that well is shut off, but the transmission main still basically goes, from what I've been told, basically goes through the property that the village owns there.
Okay.
And so the other key is that you have power service here because you have a treatment plant there, and you have power service here because you have a instead of having a battery powered meter. That actually works really well for you guys.
How far out of town does our water go?
Well, there are customers and, along the transmission line that runs along 353, so there are people, and I'm,
Just short of Blending Road is where it starts.
yeah, I mean, there's customers from pretty darn close to where the spring site is,
I
right?
wanna say Brummagem might be the one that's farthest
I was
gonna say,
south.
The
Pretty
first
much.
one.
I think so.
Yeah, I say my brother-in-law lives just down the.
So there's a few scattered users as you come along that road, and there's some also along these lines. None of them, I don't believe any of them are before the
Well,
treatment plants, right?
No.
There's one at
One
at Mayo, I forget the gentleman's name, I wanna say it's David or something like that, but his water comes directly out of one of the spring boxes, bypasses the treatment plant altogether. He's responsible for his own water, but there's an agreement or something, that's how I always understood it, that he has rights to.
He probably filters it.
There's a,
He has a tank and a filter and all this stuff we had to work with a little bit while we were doing the rehab up there.
yeah, there's a situation where there's a spring here that feeds a cattle trough, and he gets first go at that spring, filling his cattle trough, and if there's extra, then it can be diverted off. But basically, I think they just have a spring piped to him right now that we're not using for us at all.
Yeah, no, we do have a line from that, in that box, I think,
Does it?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's, yeah.
Yeah, there's-
it's connected to
Basically, these are clusters of springs. I think at Mayo, there's
3 or
didn't
4.
bring it. Yeah, there's 3 or 4. There's
We rebuilt 4.
4 or 5 of them here. We have maps of them laid out. I didn't bring a copy
No,
of the
it's
map.
Okay.
And then there's like 7 or 8 of them at least, maybe more up here.
A dozen of them.
Yeah, up at
And
Kelly
that's why
Summit.
this is, phase one is so focused over the rehab of Kelly Summit, because, well,
Yeah.
going.
Well, as you can see, I mean, this is going back country. It's going through ravines. These are ravines. And all here, this is running primarily along or fairly close to the road until you get up here. And it's, I believe, underground for all this. This is the one that's got sections that are above ground. This entire section here is kind of back in the swampy area. You can't really get
The only
to
access
past
is baseball
Road.
road.
And this is way up on the hill, so to get at it is very difficult. And if there's a leak, finding that leak, like it's in the.
Well, there's a high spot on that line going over the hill where they're just leaving water run all the time. So there's a blow off and water spurting out all the time.
Right.
So otherwise the water airlocks.
Yeah, so phase 1 is, metering in the village here, the overflow at the tank, a meter here, and here. And then work to improve the springs here at this site, so that they more reliably produce water when you open them.
The 2 treatment plants are rated for 100 gallons a minute each, which means you can make like 280,000 gallons a day. But for a village this size, that's way more water than you should really be using. More than twice as much. So one of the reasons we want to do the metering in phase 1 is so you can start to get a handle on what are your actual water needs. So then you can more wisely spend money on the balance of the project.
The biggest goal is that one of the underlying goals is that the health department requires you to have water sources that if you take your single largest source out of service, the remaining sources can meet your peak day demand. Okay, so basically, we have Blackmar and Cobo and Kelly and Mayo. If you take the largest source out of service, can you still make your peak day demands with the remaining ones? And so right now, we gotta say Blackmar is kind of out of the picture indefinitely, for all intents and purposes.
One of the problems is you have no idea what your peak day demand is.
Right, we have no idea what our peak day demand is, but if we get metering in, we can identify our average day demand, we can identify our peak day demand, and we identify how much water we're making. And say, this is just a hypothetical, say the village determines that their peak day demand is such that Cobo Well and Kelly Summit can make all the water you need right now. Maybe you hold off on spending, $1 million building this pipeline. And you keep using this unless it becomes, such a maintenance headache. But you focus on this, get this reliably working, and then you're reliably able to provide water for the people in the village. You don't spend money you don't have to spend. Make it cost more right now. future phases, when you look at the big scope that's in our original report, when you go and read that, you'll see we're talking about replacing pipelines all the way from these springs. We're talking about, right now, the water comes into the village, then up to the tank and overflows. The tank just floats up there in the end of the system. And you can get situations where the water just, it basically, the fresh water comes in and people use it, and the water sits up in the tank. You can get the right scenario in the summer where you're not making extra water, where that can happen. The water can sit in the tank and get stale. Ideal situation is that water comes to the tank and then out to people. But to achieve that, you'll end up basically having to build a new pipeline once you get to the village up to the tank that's dedicated to fill the tank. And it would deal with a lot of problems that you have right now. Right now, you guys try to monitor chlorine residual up there, your disinfectant residual. You boost it if you need to. That's not ideal. There's more and more regulation coming out about disinfection byproducts, it's called. And it's chemical compounds that'll form when you disinfect the water, and the chlorine reacts with things in the water and breaks down to these other chemicals. If you keep doing that cycle, you build up these compounds. It's typically something you don't have to worry about if you're using groundwater. You have surface water intruding here, and you'll start to see more of that effect. Anyhow, the phase 1 scope is, like we said, a large project. It was $3.6 million, and this is probably worth pointing out that was written back in 2013. If the village doesn't do that work until 2016 or 2018, something like that, the cost is going to go up every year. So what might have been $3.6 million to do the whole project might be $4 million. So that's just something to keep in the back of your head, that these numbers aren't gospel the further out you get. So anyhow, that's why if we can use phase 1 to identify a scope of work that may allow us to reduce the future scope of work, that's what the village was going for when we worked on this phase 1 report last fall. With input from Jason Hopperbeck and Mayor Pritchard and board members at the time there. That's how we came up with this phase 1. And the local health department is very supportive and interested in seeing metering in the village. That's kind of one of their biggest things. And so we had to kind of convince the funding agency that metering was important. And he wrote a letter to them that really laid out the case for it, and they accepted that as evidence that should be something they allow as part of the phase 1 work.
No, just that 50,000, right, was potential local share. And Gene's obviously included here. Is there any sort of formulation of a plan or anything going on with that at all?
They were hoping that with the refunding,
That would
would make up enough in savings and so forth, that we could come up with 50 to 100,000.
Do you think that'd be fairly reasonable?
Depending on the refunding. But I realized with the refunding that they could wait up to a year before they do the bonds, because they're gonna wait until the most favorable interest rate.
Sure.
And it could be a year out, like, before they do the refunding.
The refunding is really gonna help you, I'm guessing it's gonna help you more long-term, so that
Right, it's gonna lower our.
frees up your ability to take on more debt, really.
Yeah.
But again, that's what municipal
But now some of the-
speak to that.
Accounts that we've already paid, that's towards the 50,000 already, is it not?
Well, I don't know the answer to that specifically. I know Jeff Smith had worked with
Right.
Eric mostly on that.
The 650,000 work identified, that I believe that what there was discussion of the local share being, you said 50 to 100,000, because there were expenses the project had incurred, like our preliminary reports that hadn't been paid yet, and so there was some engineering costs in paying Municipal Solutions for the grant applications, that kind of preliminary work. Like I said, this project started in the fall of 2012.
But the fees we've paid you already.
Yeah, we
That's
got,
part of our local.
we got paid earlier this year for work being done
Right.
since
Right,
2012.
so if we said that the local share is gonna be something between 0 and 100,000, some of that has already been paid out.
Right.
To pay us
Okay.
and pay Municipal Solutions.
Cool.
It's not that there'll be 100,000 additional local share right now.
Okay.
Well, then you have some ability maybe to tweak the scope if it, you know, if the bids came in high or something.
So this 600,000 that's gotta be used by December, is that at the completion of the project, or is that just, how does that?
I believe they paid draws as you complete the work. It's not like they give it out at the end of the construction
So much
project.
for this phase, so much for.
Well,
that.
it's,
I think
as
what
the
they-
contractor submits bills.
Yeah, what they do is each month, Municipal Solutions usually does this, but they compile all the invoices for that month. Once they're approved by the board, then they send them to Office of Community Renewal. They review them, if they're all approved as eligible, then they wire the money into the account that the village has set up. And then the village can write checks.
And
in.
then
And
it goes
they
right.
say it's a quick turnaround.
Usually it's
It
a
is.
matter of a week.
Yeah,
It's
quick
like a week,
turnaround.
so you write a check, you know, a week or so after the board meeting, and you're able to pay the contractor's bill for that month.
So not to jump ahead, so essentially with everything that's going on, because there's one little bit that's preventing us from going forward right now that Jake will go over. But essentially, from when I spoke with you guys, is that we have to have everything submitted by June, so that hopefully come August, we're able to start going and get all the work done and utilize the CBDG funds, and we're good,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, more or less, we're on our schedule is very compressed right now.
Yeah,
We've been held up by the environmental review, and maybe we ought to talk about
Yeah,
that.
they give you, the CDBG grant, like I said, is a 2-year window, and even the 2-year window is sometimes a pretty aggressive window. And on this project, like I explained, because that money was kind of held hostage, tied to doing the whole bigger project, nothing happened basically the whole first year that money was on the table.
There was no way the village could afford to commit to the whole project.
Right.
So you lost almost half the time frame that you had to use the money before you could commit to say, yeah, we can use that money. So anyhow, basically this project has to be on the most accelerated path possible at every step from now to the end of the year. Let's see, where was it?
Figure on the
Yeah,
NEPA.
right at the bottom of this page, starting in the next page. Yeah, so once we got the okay to separate this out, we've been working on this NEPA review. So what it is the CDBG funds are ultimately federal funds. So you have to do a federal environmental review. That's called the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. And it goes over a lot of the same stuff, but a lot of the same types of environmental concerns. But one that's come up that's an issue for us is that it was proposed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list the northern long-eared bat as a potential threatened species. And they, so after the seeker review was done last summer, we got a random email that came through to the village saying, you know, this might be an issue. And then about a month ago, I think it was, they actually finalized that it was a threatened species. And so
We need
this
a
is
permit.
impacting projects across New York State, like wholesale. That the northern long-eared bat is a very widespread potential habitat, and so basically, if you have to do tree clearing, it's holding you up. And what they say is, well, we need you to do the tree clearing between October 1st and March, over the winter when the bats aren't hibernating in the trees or aren't sleeping in the trees. And the issue is on this project, at least this first phase of it, we can't do that. Right, it's too late, and we told the biologists that straight up. And so as we were discussing it with them, after we met with Dan last week, we finally got a hold of the biologist, talked to her in person on the phone, and just hashed through the situation with her, explaining where the village was, that this has to happen this year. And asking questions, one that came up, as we said, is disturbance, the acreage of disturbance, is that significant at all? And she said, oh yeah, if you can stay below an acre, it makes everything much more streamlined. We have this fast track to giving you a permit. And so we started to look into that, and
So,
we think that we can limit our tree clearing at the site to less than an acre. We originally wanted to accomplish two things. In our scope of work, we had said we needed to improve access to the springs, which we took to mean both the road up to the treatment plant and then up to the springs that sit above it on the hill. And we were looking at, we eliminate, if the village eliminates trying to improve the driveway up to the building, you know, it's a driveway that's there, it's been there since the building was built in 2001. It's a tough driveway. If you drive out
You'll
there,
see on
you go out
Tuesday
there.
how great it is.
Yeah, in the summer, it's tough to get up. In the winter, I don't know how they do it.
Floor it.
But it's been the way that it's been now 15 years. So if it's what's gonna hold up this issue with getting a permit for the bats, it might be prudent for the village to address it, you know, in a later phase of the project, or do it with local fund, you know, just use your local guys to go out there next year or something, try to improve the driveway a little bit. You get the, you know, cut it a little bit longer so that you get a better slope on the hill.
Jake, I'd like to throw one thing in here.
Mhm.
One of the problems that came up with the NEPA review is CDBG said they wanted us to do the NEPA review on the entire $3.6 million project. And my argument back to them was, we don't even know what we're going to do. Part of the first phase is to put the metering in so we can better scope the rest of the project.
We don't know where we're gonna put this pipe exactly.
Or we may not put it at all. So how do we do an environmental review on what we don't know what we're going to build? And so ultimately they said that's just what you have to do. So that's what we set about to do. And one of the problems is that we will certainly disturb more than an acre if we do the whole pipeline project. So what we're going to try to do is go back to them and say, look, we got a sign off from Fish and Wildlife for phase 1. And we won't be able to until we know the routing and the rest of it. And hopefully we can convince them to.
Yeah, it'll also say that a
the
permit,
environmental review on that basis.
a contingent point for Fish and Wildlife on their sign off would be do the clearing in the winter. So future phases, we could commit to do the clearing in the winter.
Right.
On future phases.
Or late fall, I mean.
Right.
it's-
October is a great time to do it.
Exactly.
When they're in hibernation and they're not around.
Exactly, late fall, now winter's gonna be
Especially with some of the areas.
really hard to get in there and.
Oh, yeah, when it's so muddy.
Right.
So, you know what, we're gonna try to make the best sales pitch we can to them. And then we're gonna see what happens.
But it can be quite difficult to identify environmental impacts from work where you don't even, you know, you don't have a specific plan on some of these future.
Right.
The aspects of the future phases.
And another thing about NEPA is typically NEPA is not done until you have detailed engineering drawings. But they gave us a waiver on that because of the nature of the work we're doing in phase 1, but they want us to do the NEPA review on the entire project. So it's really screwy. It's a whole bunch of circular logic, and we spent a month trying to convince them to back off on that.
You gotta
And they
run
just,
just like-
finally, the decision was, look, we just gotta move forward, because we can't waste any more time. So we started doing the environmental review on the whole thing.
So, part of what we're hoping to look at with, you know, with Dan and Corey tomorrow and any of you that come is, we'll say, you know, look at the work we have to do. Can we all agree that we should focus on the springs themselves and access from the treatment plant up to the springs?
Yeah.
So that we can do the work up there, so that we can get up there if we have to maintain anything in the future. I can tell you right now, I shouldn't say it, public meeting, there's a dead deer laying up there, like, feet away from one of the springs. And, it
All right, we'll
probably
get
should
taken
be,
care of tomorrow.
it probably should be dealt with. But that's the kind of stuff, is there's not even a road up there right now. So right now, it's wandering up through the woods by feet.
Footpath at best.
Yeah, so we definitely need to get access up there, but if we can keep it under an acre, it makes all the difference. And, the biologist from Fish and Wildlife is supposed to be looking into, basically because it's a new species and a new rule, this whole process that we're talking about to get a permit will be one of the first projects in the state to go through it. So she wasn't.
But we gotta do it on a fast track.
Well, no, basically what it is they recognize they're gonna have to issue permits because there's gonna be so many projects running into this issue, because it's so widespread.
Right.
You look at some endangered species and you have to have a very specific situation before you're gonna have to worry about them. And they're saying these bats could be in
Any tree around.
all these different types of trees, and so they can be anywhere. You know, so you can't say, oh, there won't be any here. If there's trees, there's probably potential bat habitat. So they're setting up kind of a whole process that's streamlined for issuing permits to small projects that are less than an acre. So she was going to look into, I said to her, are we talking weeks versus months? And what are we talking? And she seemed to think, yeah, we're talking less than a month versus 3 months for a full permitting process.
So
So,
we got to convince
Right.
CDBG
right.
that that's adequate.
And the last other sign off we got, other than Fish and Wildlife, was Farm and Ag Lands Protection, and they basically said the first phase that you're doing, there's nothing that's going to impact that. You're doing work up at these springs and meters, and so they gave us a sign off letter, and basically with future phases, you'll have to submit
Right.
what's called a final notice of intent that says what we're going to do with these pipelines, because this is all an ag district. Most of the property out on the south side of the village there is ag district. But anyhow, we have to identify any conditions or any potential impacts and then go through this process. So once we can pull this together with Fish and Wildlife, there's a public comment period process that you go through with, it's the terminology, I don't know if I have that with me. Release of funds is one of the two things you ask for, and the other is your finding of no significant impact. FONSI and RRO.
That's what they call it.
Request for release of funds. And so anyhow, that process is spelled out, but it depends on like if it falls on holidays, et cetera, but it's on the order of 35 days, 40 days to go through that whole process, at the conclusion of which you'll be released to commit to spend funds. So potentially we could sync everything up and we would have our design done, we'd be ready to go to bid, or even potentially feel comfortable to put it out for bid just before the end of that period, but we wouldn't be able to award any contracts until we get that release of funds.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that,
They might not let
they
us
might not
put
let
it out to bid.
I don't think.
Oh, really?
CDBG is.
See, they have to
very-
approve the package before you bid, and I'm not sure they'll approve the package until they have that release of funds.
Yeah. But I mean, the bidding period will be 2 to 3 weeks, and then you'll have probably a month before they would be in position to start doing any work. Out of the spring site, the work is limited enough in scope, and the materials that will be used are going to be fairly common, so that might not be as much of a lead time. The meters take, there is some lead time with getting meters. The way that we were proposing to bid this job, based on our past experience, is we'll do a meter supply contract. So you bid it out and say, this is what we're looking for meters, and the different suppliers tell you what they'll sell them to you for. And then a separate contract for installing them, and have a contractor that would come in and switch out all the meters.
How much time are we talking to actually do the work?
Yeah.
Well, when we put together the contract for the work at the Springs, we can compress that time frame a little bit. The contractor just has to work a little faster. We can't.
That's good.
Still,
The meter installation is interesting because, a small guy might give you a better price, but he's gonna string it out too long.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we did the one in Randolph, they came in and hit it hard. They had 2 or 3 crews, depending on what day they were there, and they were getting 4 or 5 meters each day, each crew, and they got it done right away, but that was a fairly big company. East Aurora just did one, and they were kind of trying to get it done in a hurry, and they did A plus B bidding. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically say, okay, here's my cost. Let's say it's $100 a household to put a meter in. And then the B is, we'll pay you more if you get it done before this date. So DOT used to do that on critical projects. So if you get it done within 100 days, you get $100 a meter. If you get it done in 90 days, you get $105, and $110 you get done in 80 days. So that's another thing we can look at, but I don't think we'll really need to do that. I think we'll have enough time.
Talking with Corey, typically the vast majority of them in a situation like this where there's meters already there, and whether they're working or not is one thing, but there's a meter there. So you're simply unscrewing the meter nuts and putting in a new meter. It's pretty straightforward, and if there are any identified they did, over there, the contractor was, I don't know, it was $80 or something if they were just replacing a meter, and it was several hundred if they were having to cut
That was
it.
what, 180 or something,
180 or.
where they had a couple of them.
You also don't have a lot of commercial users that have bigger meters. Most of them will be residential sized meters. We identify only a small handful that might have a larger meter. And in those cases, if the meter's still working and it's a decent meter, we might not have to replace that meter.
I think the largest is an inch, right?
What's that?
I think the largest meter is an inch, is that right?
You might have.
I would imagine the school probably has.
Yeah,
quite a bit
yeah,
than
the school
that.
does absolutely, but.
But yeah, some of the, composite panel, stator sticks, we'd have to look at what they have, but they might be a 2-inch meter or something instead of the typical 3/4 inch.
I think, no, in Cherry Creek, when we did theirs, they did it the opposite of what we're talking about here, where, all the simple ones, what the village did is they put a guy on the payroll, and all he did was go around and replace meters all day, and if he ran into one that was difficult, they let a contractor or a plumber to do the difficult one, which is the opposite of what we're talking about here.
Right.
But they had a lot of time. I mean,
Yeah.
they spread out over like 18 months getting all the meters put in, so you don't have to.
Yeah, 2 months. A couple months.
Yeah. There are companies that'll bid a meter install contract, that's what they do, is install meters, and so they'll come in and,
The one in Randolph is from New Jersey.
but they're set up to do it. They have a website set up so they can tell their customers to go log on and set up an appointment, or call into their number and set up an appointment. And so they're all set up for making it go quickly, smoothly, seamlessly. So if we get some contractors like that interested in this job, and I would imagine they should be because of the size of it, that'll be the swiftest way to accomplish that part of the work.
Pretty much everything, isn't it?
So that's kind of, that gets you up to where we stand right now, is we're desperately trying to get Fish and Wildlife to give us what they can for a sign off and get it to CDBG and say, you're gonna.
They agreed on the acres, so, I mean, when was that exactly?
Last Wednesdays when we
Yeah.
had that phone call with them, and we actually, back at my desk at the office, I have a letter, that explains how we're gonna stand an acre and has an exhibit and everything, and I'm gonna bring it tomorrow, because Dan can sign that and we get it sent over to them.
I don't think they agreed on it, did they? That's just what is the normal
They
standard.
basically just told us, if you can get below an acre, that's gonna be the threshold that's gonna make things, that's definitely gonna improve your situation.
I don't think there's any problem getting under an acre.
No, we've looked at it several ways, and we think we can comfortably tell them, yes, we can stay under an acre.
We do have to get a nice survey going.
Yeah, get the surveyor out there.
We've been soliciting
their
proposals.
We got a proposal from the one that we've worked with, when you're getting funding like this, there's always strings attached from the funding agency. And so, one of the big ones that you'll run into is DBAs and WME, so women or minority owned certified businesses. You have to set aside a certain percentage or meet certain goals of trying to get participation from those.
20% now.
Yeah, so, we called a woman-owned surveyor that we've worked with in the past that does good work, and they gave us a quote, and they could schedule us for like
Middle of June.
or something. That's not gonna work for folks.
So that's a little.
But at least we can show good faith effort if we try to get participation. So right now, we have another surveyor giving us a quote that is, more local and able to probably get us in a lot faster. It's pretty limited survey we need up there. We need to identify where the springs are. We have a pretty good idea from GPS points where they sit on the hill relative to the plant, but we need to get an actual topo in there.
Mark and Jake have absolutely been on top of all this, as you can
Yeah,
tell,
you guys are-
and they're going as fast as they possibly can. It's just been one stumbling block after another, but hopefully within another month or so, we'll be able to really make some huge progress and get rolling.
Yeah, I think we're all up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, the village hasn't committed, they haven't been able to commit funds with this 600,000, but I guess that's also a plus if something stumbles it up with Fish and Wildlife or whatever, you haven't committed the construction funds.
Right.
But this is an opportunity
one thing I wanted to mention is the Blackmar well, you know, we're sort of at this point saying, we just pretend that isn't there anymore, but, you know, the village has a significant investment there, and I'm not even sure you finished paying for that. Do you know about it? No, so you haven't even finished paying for that, so, you know, that issue still needs to be resolved. And, DEC came in there and spent a huge pot of taxpayer super fund money, and really just made a mess, you know, and it doesn't work. And ultimately, that's gotta be resolved. So at some point, you know, you're all new board members, but you're gonna have to start to probe into that. And,
Now, that project is nothing that can be touched by anybody else besides
well, it's all,
it's their thing.
it's their thing, you know, it's their, so in the project engineer that was working with the New York State Superfund, he moved on to a different so there's a new guy responsible now. And then they had subbed out the design to Ecology and Environment, and they had a couple other firms that were working on it. And all the people that were working from those firms have gone on now. So there's really like no continuity, it's all just kind of sitting there. And, you know, at some point, I mean, we've been focusing on this right now, but at some point in a little further down the road this year, we need to push that. Our firm has had limited involvement in it. I went to a few meetings for Jason and participated in some conferences and raised some questions, and the village paid me for that, and Superfund reimbursed the village for that.
That was like
But
$400.
before, you know, we would spend any more time on it, you'd wanna be talking to Superfund and say, you know, we want our engineer to get involved in this, but you need to pay him,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we got the green light, because they're kind of all going their separate ways. Put this on the back burner, if we get a green light to have, say, you guys, see if there's any salvaging of it to make it useful.
Well, yeah, I mean, something's gotta be done with it, you know, it's one thing to spend almost $1 million and then
Right.
say, well, it doesn't work, sorry.
Yeah,
And now you can't even use it, you know.
Right. If it worked, I mean, for perspective, the 2 treatment plants for the springs are rated for 100 gallons a minute. Now, right now, they make more than that at times of the year because there's no control on them. So if the springs make a lot of water, it just floods right onto them, which isn't a good situation, actually. But, so let's say that they're each 100, that's 200 gallons a minute. Blackmar well is rated for, the original well pump was designed for 350 gallons a minute. In 2013, the operator was saying it can do approximately 300. And they typically run it, they turn it down and run it at 200 to 250. So that well alone can make more water than.
So essentially, without even dealing with any of the piping issues, if we got this phase 1 going up and running, Golden, move on to Blackmar, this could be just old news,
Yeah.
forget all about it.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're still paying a loan on that treatment plant out there, but.
Right, but still, who wants to dump more money in, you know?
Well, that's why we focused on the other side of the hill for this phase 1.
It's probably worth mentioning, you know, right now it runs along the road for quite a bit of it. What was identified is the potential to utilize the railroad right away, which is now the Pat McGee Trail right away, so it's owned by a development, industrial development agency.
Cattaraugus
Right?
Local Development Corporation, I guess, it's LDC, isn't it, Rick?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's-
Rick Lefevre is involved in, and he had initially, when the project, all this was coming together in 2012, 2013, it indicated that, you know, they were very interested at that point in working with the village if it came to that. Which, that kind of gives you a nice clean right of way.
Yep.
There's some issues with, then you're further away from the houses and stuff, but there's no utilities in the way, those type of things are building it. So, but that railroad right away runs, you know, fairly close to the Cobo Well right there, and then would continue right into town, and there's some small portion of it that's owned by a different.
It's owned by the Cattaraugus County IDA, once you get to, New Albion Road.
Is it New Albion Road?
Yes.
Yeah, and so from there though, you'd be able to take the railroad right away almost to the tank. So
Do you
basically,
know that the IDA would be willing to work like how?
Well, we've worked with them before in the past, I mean, sometimes they like to sell you a license to occupy the roadway, but you just have to work around it, you know.
but
I think
bring-
we could get an
Bring
easement.
some political pressure to bear.
yeah, But, I mean, that is it's quite the opportunity that you just happen to have a railroad right away, that's not used as a railroad anymore, that's right there, that runs directly to the village. But that's, a future phase, but that would give you a good, secure place to put pipe in, yeah, and if it ultimately came that this side wasn't needed, you use it as long as it's working, but don't sink a lot of money out there.
Right, especially with the swamps and all that.
That's, you wouldn't wanna have to rely on that, the way things are right now, because that, we've walked that line, and you're out in the middle of a swamp, not exactly sure, we tried tracing it out, we have a general idea, we put some GPS shots on it.
Right in the creek.
Really, you can see it, huh?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. There's actually a couple, not out there, but if you go out 353 just towards a little valley, if you look in the right spot, you can see the
Or you can see it sitting on pedestals
Yeah,
off to
exactly.
the side, yeah.
They have little concrete pedestals, and the pipe just sits
Oh,
like
yeah,
on the grade.
picture.
So, it's.
And it's held together, the pipes, the joint is made up where there's 2 bolts on the joint, and there's spots where those bolts are completely rotted away, and the only thing holding the joint together is rust.
A little bit of habit.
Yeah, habit, yeah.
So that kind of gives you an overview of where we stand right now. Get you guys up to speed on structural fit and where we're headed. But reading those 2 reports, Dan will forward to you. That might bring up some questions you have. Don't hesitate to get a hold of one of us. And, we can probably answer your questions. And, those reports spell it out in a lot more detail, the scope of the whole big project, what we identified.
All right, well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you both for
Thanks for
coming
that,
and helping
definitely.
us with that, and getting everybody the lowdown.
I was gonna say, on the DEC issue, Jason Offerbeck may have been the last person that had detailed correspondence with them, because he had been kind of spearheading that.
Okay.
And so, if you're trying to get up to speed on where that stands, he might, if he's willing to talk about it, he might be a good starting point. But other than that, he at least give you a number.
And you guys already have a lead on another surveyor,
Yeah, we've got, and I was probably gonna call E&M as well, because they actually designed the plans, so they might have some of the topographic survey already done.
Thank you. They might have some of the areas, but,
So we're gonna call them this week and get a proposal from them as well. The surveyor that work is included in our contract, but we have to hire them as a subcontractor.
When do you think these surveys could have been done last, early 90s?
Well, when E&M designed the plan was probably in the late 90s, so they would have done some survey then. I don't know if they surveyed everything we need, they surveyed where they're gonna build the plan, so.
Okay.
But that's part of what we need, so.
yeah, the plans inspector, you get,
Mark, what did you say the 2 springs were rated, the 2 springs?
Each of them are rated, the plants are rated for 100 gallons a minute.
Okay, that's what I would thought, I wasn't sure I heard it.
one of the phase 1 pieces is to take the Kelly Summit plant and put in a diversion structure that basically when water is piped to the plant, it'll allow 100 gallons a minute in the plant and divert the rest off to waste.
So basically, you're wasting untreated water, rather
Right.
than treating all of it and then wasting it after it's treated.
Okay.
And it allows the treatment to be much more effective. So, it's good enough flooding out the filter that's trying to, it's actually, you're biologically cleaning the water, you're not just physically filtering it through sand. But when you force too much water through, basically you're just physically filtering it.
You wanna form a schmutz deck on the.
Right,
Yes.
the schmutz.
Schmutz deck.
So, are there any other questions, or?
No.
I think I'm good.
That covered pretty well.
Thank you very much, sir, appreciate it.
Yeah, bring it to me.
Thank you, Mark.
Bring it up to
Appreciate
me,
it.
bud.
Thank you.
Thanks, nice to meet you. No problem.
I don't know all the names here.
Oh, I'm Bo. Bo.
If you, I'll just contact you, if you guys want, if you
Dirk
want to
with
get
a W.
contact
Oh,
us,
yeah.
let me know.
Tell them that everybody has a physical idea on how it works.
Yeah, they're having it.
And with that, I can just send an email or any corresponding email that's sent forth, so that just everybody knows and everybody can work together at getting it to make this happen.
I'm afraid so.
As far as the meeting tomorrow, several times. Okay, but I'm still gonna try and make it, but as long as that's what it is, I understand. Alright, wonderful.
But we got a lot to get over.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Jake.
Have a good night, we'll talk soon.
All right, so next on that, we're gonna go over will be for the committees, for the trustees.
Deputy mayor and committees.
Yes, so, first off, for deputy mayor, I would like to extend that offer to Tom. And does anybody else have an issue?
No?
All right, so should we make a motion on each individual one?
I would say put the deputy mayor and committees all in the same, like you did at the
Before?
organizational.
Okay, because also will be done, state auditor of finance will be another part. But first off, so for the police department for committees that are still intact, the police department is still myself and Tom. Streets DPW is myself. I would extend this to anybody that wants to help with the streets and DPW.
I would like that.
Okay.
Kind of turn that whole board thing. Which I don't see a problem with that.
And would the whole board like to work together on the streets and DPW?
Yeah, everybody can, yeah. Personally, I'm not much like this, so I'd like to know about everything.
All right, so we're gonna add, that'll be the village board and streets and DPW,
Okay.
okay?
Do we then need to actually consider the committee?
Well, that's gonna go, well, that'll be like, what is it, what else is village board, do you remember?
Board is also water and sewer, events, parade, insurance, and civil defense.
Yes, so all of them will, so that's gonna still follow with it, still that we all report and discuss everything, just as it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, youth council, I need 2 people that will sign up to work with the youth council. This is, at the current present time is what, Stacy?
Yeah, right now Stacy